Tate and Noah thought they would always be those two boys dancing in the middle of a room full of strangers. We never guessed Tate and I would one day wonder how we got so close. And somehow ended up so far apart. Tate's cold fingers slipped beneath the edge of Noah's shirt, his hands resting against his stomach as if he needed to remind himself that Noah was real. The touch sent a shock through me. It was small. Almost nothing. Yet after years of distance, it felt enormous. I froze. Not because I was afraid. Because I couldn't understand it. Tate didn't seem to notice what he was doing. Or maybe he noticed too much. His expression wasn't the familiar teasing smile I knew so well. It wasn't irritation. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't the guarded look he wore whenever he felt too exposed. It was something else. Something I had never seen on Tate's face before. Conflict. His eyes looked like he was standing at the edge of something, trying to decide whether stepping forward would be freedom or a mistake. Like he had made a choice. A real choice. And he wasn't sure if he would regret it. For once, Tate wasn't reacting to what other people expected from him. He wasn't thinking about his family. His name. His responsibilities. The future is waiting for him. He was just standing there with me. The person he had spent 20 years protecting, confusing, pushing away, and holding onto all at once. I studied his face, trying to understand what was happening inside his head. Because Tate always had an explanation. A reason. A carefully constructed argument for everything he did. But this time there was nothing. No speech. No excuse. No reminder that we were only buddies. Just a quiet moment where he seemed almost as uncertain as I was. And that scared me more than anything. Because Tate Blue was never uncertain. He could walk into a room full of powerful people and command their attention. He could make decisions involving millions of dollars without hesitation. But standing there with me, he looked like someone facing the one thing he couldn't control. His own feelings. And for the first time, I wondered if Tate wasn't pulling away because he felt nothing. Maybe he was pulling away because he felt something he didn't know what to do with. For a moment, neither of us moved. The music continued playing softly in the background, filling the space between us with years of memories we never knew how to talk about. I could feel how tense Tate was. Not angry. Not distant. Just overwhelmed. That was the part that frightened me the most. Tate was always certain. Even when he was wrong, even when he was being stubborn, even when he was making decisions that hurt both of us, there was always a sense that Tate had already built the argument inside his head. He knew what he believed. He knew what he was supposed to do. But standing there with me, he looked like someone who had finally reached the one decision he couldn't logic his way through. Then Tate stepped forward. Without saying anything, he reached toward the radio and pressed the power button. The music stopped. The room became quiet. Too quiet. The sudden silence made everything feel more real. The bags are by the door. The security system. The goodbye he had been preparing to give. The life he was trying to walk back into. Before I could ask what he was doing, Tate moved closer again. His hand slipped beneath the edge of my shirt, not with urgency, but almost like he was grounding himself. Like he needed proof that this moment was actually happening. Before I could react, Tate wrapped his arms around me. Then he pulled me across the living room. Tate. I barely got his name out. He didn't answer. Not at first. The only thing he said, quietly and firmly, was, "Whatever happens, whatever comes after this, I'll take it, I'll absorb it, again for you." I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know if he meant the consequences, the questions, the confusion, or everything he had spent years trying to avoid. But the way he said it made it sound like a decision. Like for once Tate wasn't running. My feet stumbled against the stairs as he guided me upward. Or maybe dragged me. Not because he was trying to hurt me. Because he had already made up his mind and was afraid that if he stopped moving, he would change it. "What are you?" I started. But every question disappeared beneath the weight of his silence. The hallway was dark. The familiar hallway. The one I had walked down hundreds of times. The one that had led to countless nights, countless conversations, countless memories. Tate pulled me toward my bedroom. The bedroom we used to share. The place that had once felt like the safest room in the world. He pushed the door open and led me inside. The room looked almost exactly the same. Except everything felt different. Like we were stepping into a memory we both knew we could never completely return to. Tate guided me across the carpet and lowered me onto the mattress as if we were doing something completely normal. Something we had done 1,000 times before. Then he climbed into bed beside me. And he held me. That was it. No explanation. No speech. No argument about why this was impossible. No reminder that we couldn't be this close. He just held me. We stayed like that for at least an hour. Neither of us spoke. I kept waiting. Waiting for the moment when Tate would pull away. Waiting for him to remember why he had come downstairs with bags packed. Waiting for him to say this was a mistake. But the longer he stayed, the harder it became to understand what was happening. Because Tate had spent the entire day telling me he had to leave. And now he was still here. I wondered when he was going to go. And the longer it took, the worse it felt. Because some part of me knew that every extra minute mattered. Every extra second was something I would remember. At 6 o'clock that evening, Tate was still there. The sun had begun to fade outside. The room was quiet. Then I heard it. A low sound. Tate's stomach is growling. For the first time in hours, he looked almost like himself again. A small smile appeared on his face. "Are you going to make some dinner?" Tate asked, "or are we going to starve to death?" I stared at him. After everything. After all the words. All the pain. All the goodbye speeches. He was asking about dinner. And somehow, that felt more like Tate than anything else he had said all day. It had been a few weeks since my 24th birthday when Tate made the decision to stay. At first, neither of us called it staying. That would have made it too real. Too much like a promise. Too much like admitting that the goodbye he had prepared for himself had never actually happened. It was supposed to be temporary. A few days. A short visit. Just long enough for things to settle. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And somehow, what was meant to be a brief interruption became nearly a year of my life. Those months were some of the happiest we had ever known. Maybe the happiest. Even happier than the year we had spent together in that house before the walls went up between us. Before everything became complicated. Before Tate started measuring every word, every action, every moment of closeness. Before he convinced himself that caring about me was something dangerous. Before Susie and Talia watched him break down and cry on his mother's shoulder because he didn't know how to carry the weight of everything he believed he was supposed to become. For almost a year, it felt like we had gone backward in time. Not literally. We weren't children anymore. We couldn't erase everything that had happened. But somehow, we found pieces of the people we used to be. The laughter came back. The easy conversations. The comfortable silence. The feeling that being around each other didn't require an explanation. If someone had asked me when I had been the happiest in my life, I think I would have given them two answers. The first would have been the years from when I was 4 until I was 17. Back when life felt simple. Back when the future seemed endless. Back when every problem felt temporary and nothing seemed impossible. Tate was just Tate. I was just Noah. We weren't carrying the weight of expectations, history, or all the things we were afraid to say. The second answer would have been that year. The year Tate chose not to leave. The year he stayed with me until his 25th birthday. The year I woke up every morning and didn't have to wonder if he would disappear. For a little while, it felt like we had found our way back to each other. Not perfectly. Not the way things had been when we were kids. But close enough that I could almost believe the distance between us had never existed. The world seemed uncomplicated again. There were no arguments about futures. No conversations about what we were supposed to be. No reminders of what we couldn't have. There was just us. Two people who had spent years losing each other, somehow finding their way back into the same room. And for that brief, impossible year, I let myself believe that maybe some things didn't have to be lost forever. On Sundays, Tate didn't work. Not really. He would occasionally go into his office downtown if there was a major deal being negotiated or an important client coming into town, but otherwise, Sundays belonged to him. Terrence was still the person overseeing the majority of the Blue corporations and the home offices, but he had handed the Los Angeles location of the Blue Corporation over to Tate on his 22nd birthday, after Tate inherited his full inheritance. It was a responsibility Tate carried everywhere. Even when he wasn't at the office, I could see the weight of it. The expectations. The decisions. The constant awareness that everyone was watching him. But Sundays were different. Sundays were the one day when Tate could almost forget who the world expected him to be. They were wonderful. We would wake up slowly, without schedules or meetings or people needing something from him. We would spend the day curled up on the couch, usually with blankets thrown over us, watching television until we lost track of time. I would let Tate make a salad because he insisted he was contributing. The funny part was that Tate could manage complicated business negotiations, understand financial markets, and make decisions involving millions of dollars. But cooking was somehow beyond him. A salad was safe. A salad required no fire, no timing, and very little chance of disaster. The rest of the meal was usually TV dinners because they were about the only thing Tate could successfully microwave without creating a problem. And honestly, those were some of my favorite meals. Not because they were special. Because they were. There was something comforting about watching someone who carried so much responsibility struggle with something as simple as reading microwave instructions. It reminded me that underneath everything else, Tate was still just Tate. We would lock the doors. Close the blinds. Ignore the outside world. No business. No expectations. No family obligations. No one is trying to decide who Tate Blue was supposed to be. Just us. Sometimes we would watch entire movie marathons. Sometimes we would spend hours watching television shows until neither of us remembered what episode we were on. Sometimes I would convince Tate to go to Blockbuster and rent movies the way we did when we were younger teenagers. He would complain the entire drive there. This is outdated. Why are we physically selecting a movie? And then he would spend an hour walking through the aisles, reading every case, and pretending he wasn't enjoying himself. Those trips reminded me of being young. Before everything became complicated. Before we knew enough about the world to be afraid of it. Sundays became the best day of the week. Because for one day, Tate wasn't an heir. He wasn't a businessman. He wasn't a symbol of a family legacy. And I wasn't someone trying to understand where I belonged in his life. We were just two people on a couch, eating terrible food, watching movies, and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. For a little while, it didn't. Tuesdays and Wednesdays became the days when the house felt the most alive. Those were the nights when Susie, Anna, and Bree would come over for dinner. They brought a completely different energy with them. The conversations were never about business deals, expectations, or the weight of the Blue family name. They talked about art. Their lives. Their projects. The things they created because they loved them. They would spend hours discussing upcoming exhibits, talking about whether they were participating in a solo show or a multi-artist exhibition that week. Anna and Bree had both started having their own solo art exhibits. Their work focused mostly on still life paintings and pastoral scenes. They weren't the kind of exhibitions that attracted the entire city or filled newspaper headlines, but they were meaningful. There was something peaceful about them. The paintings captured ordinary moments and made them feel important. A bowl of fruit. A quiet landscape. A field at sunset. Small pieces of life that most people would overlook. Tate always pretended he didn't understand art. He would sit there listening carefully and then make some sarcastic comment that revealed he had actually been paying attention the entire time. Susie was usually the one who brought something homemade. She would make lemonade using her mother's recipe, freshly squeezed and prepared the same way her family had always done it. It became a tradition. No matter what else we ate, Susie's lemonade was always there. Dinner itself was usually simple. We would order Thai food and fill the table with containers of noodles, curries, rice, and everything else everyone wanted to share. Anna always brought dessert, usually something she had made herself. Her chocolate fudge cake became almost legendary in our house. It was rich, sweet, and impossible to eat only one piece of. Tate would claim he wasn't having any. Then somehow his plate would appear with a slice on it. He never admitted how it got there. Those nights were easy. No one was trying to impress anyone. No one was calculating appearances or worrying about reputation. We were just friends sitting around a table, laughing, eating, and talking about things that mattered to us. Looking back, those evenings were some of the moments when Tate seemed happiest. Not because he was avoiding his responsibilities, but because, for a few hours, he was surrounded by people who didn't need him to be anything except himself. Thursdays belonged to Andrew. Depending on his schedule, he would either come over for dinner or stop by for lunch. Andrew was still working toward his psychology degree. He already had his bachelor's degree, but he had decided to continue his education and pursue his master's. He was doing well, even though the workload was demanding. He was only about 3 months away from finishing his second year of the program, and everyone was proud of him. Andrew had always been the kind of person who followed through with things. He wasn't chasing success because of money or status. He genuinely wanted to help people. That was what made the conversations with Tate's uncles so interesting. Tim and Joey had been corresponding with Andrew about the possibility of opening his own clinic the following fall. It wasn't just a business opportunity. They believed in him. They saw the potential for him to build something meaningful, something that could help people. Andrew would talk about his ideas, his plans, and the kind of environment he wanted to create. Tate would listen carefully, occasionally making a sarcastic comment, but everyone knew he respected Andrew. Those Thursdays became another small tradition. Good food. Long conversations. People sitting around the table talking about the future without the pressure of having everything figured out immediately. It was a wonderful time. The air outside was crisp but warm. Spring was slowly giving way to summer. The days were getting longer, but the heavy heat hadn't arrived yet. It wasn't quite summertime. Not yet. June was just around the corner. There was something peaceful about that period of time. The world felt like it was waiting for something, but not in a frightening way. Just quietly changing. And inside that house, for a little while, everything felt settled. Tate was there. Our friends were nearby. Everyone was moving toward their futures. And for once, the future didn't feel like something we had to fear. It simply felt like something that was coming. Friday afternoons belonged to Jack. After a long week, we had created our own little tradition. We would meet at the cinema and spend the afternoon watching foreign films. French, Italian, sometimes German. It didn't really matter what language the movie was in. Jack enjoyed them all. He had earned a minor in foreign languages from Brown University, and he took every opportunity to use it. Sometimes the subtitles were too small or too far away to read comfortably. Sometimes the translation was awkward. And sometimes Jack would simply translate because he could. He always seemed proud of himself when he caught a phrase that the subtitles had changed or shortened. "That's not what they said," he would whisper. Then he would quietly explain the actual meaning while the movie continued playing. I would laugh because somehow Jack could turn even a serious foreign film into an entertaining conversation. Those afternoons were never just about the movies. They were about spending time with someone who appreciated the small details. Jack noticed things most people missed. A line of dialogue. A piece of cinematography. The way a character moved through a scene. He had a passion for art that extended far beyond paintings. And his own career was thriving. His connections in the art world had grown significantly, and those relationships helped Susie, Bree, and Anna find more opportunities for their work. Because of Jack's introductions and support, their solo art exhibits became more successful. He didn't take credit for their talent. That was something I admired about him. He understood that he was opening doors, not creating the art. Their success came from their own dedication. Jack simply helped people find the audience they deserved. Those Fridays were peaceful. After the chaos of the week, the business meetings, family responsibilities, and everything that came with Tate's world, it was nice to sit in a dark theater and focus on something completely different. For a few hours there were no expectations. No legacy. No pressure. Just a good movie, a friend who loved translating every other sentence, and the feeling that life was finally moving at a manageable pace. Saturdays were Tate's least favorite day of the week. Everyone else seemed to enjoy them except him. A slower morning. A break from work. A chance to relax. But Tate always knew what Saturday afternoon meant. It meant Mark. Every Saturday, Mark would drive over in his car to pick me up. It became such a regular part of our routine that Tate had turned it into his own strange ritual. Before Mark arrived, Tate would walk outside, pick up his red-tinted shovel and stick it into the lawn. Right where Mark would see it when he pulled up. He never said anything. He didn't have to. The message was obvious. Don't touch Noah if you value your neck, breath, and life. Mark would pull into the driveway, look at the shovel, then look toward the house. Every time, he would remember the first time Tate had ever threatened him. The infamous shovel incident. The day Tate had made it very clear that if Mark ever tried anything with me, there would be deadly or fatal consequences. Looking back, those memories were almost unbelievable. Tate had always been intense. Protective. Dramatic. He could turn the smallest situation into something that felt like a scene from a movie. But over time things changed. Not because Tate suddenly liked Mark. He didn't. Tate never liked Mark at all. He still watched him carefully. Still questioned his intentions. Still made sarcastic comments whenever Mark said something Tate found suspicious. But he stopped escalating things in a physical way. He never tried to violently confront Mark again. He never threatened to jump on Mark or do something reckless. Not because he had completely mellowed. Not because he suddenly trusted him. It was because I had finally drawn a line. I had told Tate that if he ever put his hands on Mark again, I would leave. That had gotten through to him in a way nothing else had. Because Tate could tolerate people being angry with him. He could tolerate people misunderstanding him. But the idea of losing me because of his own actions was something he couldn't accept. So Saturdays became a strange compromise. Mark would arrive. Tate would plant the shovel. Mark would stare at it. I would pretend not to notice. And Tate would stand there with that expression on his face that said he still didn't approve, but he was trying. It was one of those moments where I could see exactly who Tate was. A person who loved fiercely. Sometimes too fiercely. Someone who struggled with where protection ended and control began. But someone who, when it truly mattered, could choose to change. Sometimes Mark would take me dancing. On other Saturdays, we would go to art exhibits, try new restaurants, or simply explore parts of Los Angeles we had never paid attention to before. Mark knew how much I loved Mexican food, so he made it his personal mission to find every hidden gem the city had to offer. He would drag me to every cafe, bistro, food market, and little hole-in-the-wall restaurant he could find. It didn't matter if the place was tucked away on a quiet street or if nobody had ever heard of it. To Mark, that was part of the adventure. Trust me, he would say. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I questioned his choices when we ended up somewhere with a menu I couldn't pronounce. But most of the time, he was right. Every Saturday became an opportunity to discover something new. A tiny family-owned restaurant. A cafe with unusual desserts. A small place hidden between larger businesses that somehow served the best food we had ever tasted. We would leave excited, already planning how we were going to tell everyone about our newest discovery. Our friends would hear about the restaurant, the food, the atmosphere, and the story behind finding it. Those Saturdays were different from the rest of my week. With Tate, life often felt tied to history. To memories. To the weight of everything we had been through. With Mark, there was something lighter. There was movement. New experiences. A sense of curiosity about the world outside our usual routines. We weren't trying to solve anything. We weren't analyzing the past. We were simply two friends exploring a city full of things we hadn't seen yet. And for a few hours every Saturday, Los Angeles felt endless. Whenever Uncle Tim or Uncle Joey came to Lowe's Angels to visit Talia or conduct business, I always looked forward to seeing them. But during that year, it never seemed to work out. Sometimes my schedule was too demanding. Other times, Tate would become sick and my plans would change because I didn't want to leave him alone. Before I knew it, time had passed. I hadn't seen Joey in 2 years. It had been 18 months since Tim and I last sat together at our favorite cafe, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. I miss them. They were some of the best parts of my childhood. Tate's uncles were the people who made growing up feel like an adventure. Uncle Joey was the one who would take us places and turn ordinary days into memories. He would drive us to historical locations, telling stories along the way and making every trip feel like we were stepping into another era. I loved those days. The old buildings. The museums. The places where history felt alive, instead of just something written in a textbook. Uncle Tim was different but just as special. He loved auto shows and flea markets, and he had a talent for finding interesting things that everyone else walked past. He could spend hours looking at old cars, antique items, and forgotten pieces of history. As a kid, I never understood why he enjoyed it so much. As I got older, I realized it wasn't just about the objects. It was about the stories attached to them. Tim and Joey gave me experiences that had nothing to do with money or status. They gave me memories. They gave me time. And maybe that was why I missed them so much. Because when I thought about my childhood, some of my happiest moments weren't the fancy events or the important gatherings. They were the simple days. An ice cream car ride with Joey. A trip to an auto show with Tim. A cup of coffee at our favorite cafe while we talked for hours. Those were the moments that stayed with me. And I wished I could have had more of them. Sunday dinners happened every week. They became one of the traditions that everyone quietly depended on. No matter how busy life became, no matter what work obligations appeared, no matter how complicated the week had been, Sunday dinner remained. The only time we ever skipped was if it fell on Christmas, and even then we didn't really cancel. We simply changed what we were celebrating. The tradition mattered more than the date. If Talia became sick, Andrew or Jack would usually step in and help cover for her. Nobody wanted the gathering to disappear just because one person couldn't be there. That was the thing about our group. It had become bigger than any one person. Everyone contributed something. Everyone had a place. By July, the dinners had become a comfortable rhythm. That week, we decided to choose a different cuisine. Instead of our usual meals, we went with something more casual and fun. A spread of ballgame-style finger foods covered the table. There were different appetizers, snacks, and things everyone could grab while talking. And of course there was queso. Not just one kind. 4 different kinds. It became a small debate throughout the evening about which one was the best. Everyone had an opinion. Tate pretended he didn't care, but somehow he kept returning to the table to try another one. That was one of my favorite things about those dinners. They weren't fancy because they needed to be. They were special because they were ordinary. People sitting around a table. Friends laughing. Stories being told. Arguments over food that didn't actually matter. For a few hours, nobody was worried about the future. Nobody was thinking about expectations or responsibilities. It was just Sunday dinner. And those simple evenings became some of the memories I valued most. Uncle Joey had planned to come for our 4th of July celebration. Everyone had been looking forward to seeing him. But travel had other plans. His flight was canceled. Then another flight was canceled. After dealing with delays and uncertainty, he realized he wouldn't arrive until the following day. Talia eventually told him not to worry about rushing. Reschedule, she told him. There would be another gathering. Another dinner. Another opportunity to spend time together. Joey was disappointed. He had wanted to be there, especially because it had been so long since we had all been together. But he understood. The important thing was that he would still come. Uncle Tim, however, made it. When he arrived, I could immediately tell he was tired. Not just the normal tiredness from traveling. The kind of tired that came from carrying too many responsibilities for too long. But the moment I saw him, none of that mattered. I hadn't seen Tim in a year and a half. We hugged for what felt like forever. 2 minutes of catching up, laughing, asking questions, and trying to fill in all the time we had missed. He wanted to know how I was doing. How was my business going? What had changed? I was proud to tell him. The second year had gone better than I could have imagined. I had completely doubled what I had made during my first year. After paying back Joey's small loan, I had finally started feeling like the business truly belonged to me. Like I wasn't just trying to prove I could do it. I was actually building something. And strangely enough, once the loan was paid off and Tate stopped reminding me about it every month, things seemed to improve even more. The constant pressure disappeared. The money coming into my account kept increasing. The business kept growing. I wasn't chasing success because I needed to prove something anymore. I was simply working, making decisions, and watching the results appear. Tim seemed genuinely happy for me. That meant a lot. Because Tim had known me before any of this. Before the business. Before the responsibilities. Before adulthood became complicated. He had known me when I was just Noah. And standing there on 4th of July, catching up with him after so long, I was reminded how much those relationships mattered. The people who had been there before the success were the ones who made it feel meaningful. August was an unusual month in Los Angeles. Instead of the usual dry summer heat, the city had been getting an unexpected amount of rain. It was strange seeing gray skies and wet streets during a time of year when everyone expected sunshine. But somehow it made the days feel different. When the rain finally cleared, we decided to have a pool party at Talia's house. It became one of those gatherings where everyone showed up carrying something. Inflatables. Towels. Food. Bags full of things they insisted they needed, but probably didn't. Everyone brought their swimsuits and prepared to spend the afternoon relaxing by the pool. The atmosphere was easy. No schedules. No formal dinners. No expectations. Just friends and family enjoying the day. Terrence handled the grilling, of course. Nobody else was allowed to pretend they could replace him. Terrence was the grill master of the family. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a position. A responsibility. A title he had given himself and expected everyone else to respect. Anytime someone tried to step in, offer advice, or help with the grill, Terrence would politely but firmly remove them from his territory. Usually this involved a gentle tap on their hand with his spatula or whatever utensil happened to be closest. Out of my grill space. He never sounded angry. That was the funniest part. He would say it calmly, almost like he was enforcing a business policy. Everyone knew better than to challenge him. Even Tate, who argued with almost everyone about almost anything, knew that the grill belonged to Terrence. The food was always worth it. The smell of grilled food filled the backyard while everyone talked, laughed, and enjoyed the rare summer rain that had made the season feel unusual. For a day, the only important things were swimming, eating, and spending time together. And those were the moments I loved most. The ones where nobody was trying to become anything. Everyone was simply there. Talia's Labor Day party was held at Jack's house that year. Normally, everyone would have gathered at Talia, but her kitchen and patio were undergoing renovations because of a water leak that had caused more damage than anyone expected. Jack's house worked out perfectly. Because of his growing success in the art world, he had been renting a larger home with a huge backyard, and since there was no rain anywhere in sight, everyone agreed it was the perfect place to celebrate. The backyard had plenty of space for everyone to spread out. There were chairs, tables, food, music, and the comfortable feeling that came from knowing everyone there belonged. As soon as everyone arrived, Anna asked, "How's everything going, Jack?" That question was always dangerous. Because once Jack started talking about his art, everyone knew they were in for a long conversation. Jack would light up. He loved sharing the details of his work, his exhibits, and the people he had met. He told us about his latest art exhibit and proudly explained that he had sold $10,000 worth of paintings. Nobody was surprised. Jack had worked incredibly hard, and his passion for art was obvious to anyone who spent even a few minutes around him. Of course, that meant we immediately had to start planning. His third solo exhibit was coming up in October, and everyone wanted to celebrate. Jack tried to act casual about it, but he was clearly excited. It was a huge accomplishment. Not long after, I noticed Susie seemed quieter than usual. She was happy for Jack, but there was a small hint of jealousy. Not the kind that came from resentment. The kind that came from wanting her own opportunity. Jack noticed immediately. That was one of the things about him. He paid attention to people. He walked over, put an arm around her, and told her that he had found an art gallery interested in showcasing her work. Her expression changed instantly. The disappointment disappeared. Jack had a way of making people feel included. That was who he was. He never treated success like something that belonged only to him. He wanted the people around him to rise with him. When one person succeeded, he looked for ways to bring everyone else along. That was what made Jack different. His success didn't make him look down on his friends. It made him want to open more doors for them. And sitting there in that backyard, surrounded by everyone, it felt like that was what our group had become. A collection of people chasing their own dreams while still making sure nobody had to chase them alone. October brought cooler weather, and Tate decided we needed something different. Instead of the usual dinner gathering, he decided to have a cappuccino and espresso party. It was exactly the kind of idea that sounded simple when Tate suggested it, and then became much larger once everyone became involved. Everyone brought something. Coffee machines, espresso makers, milk frothers, specialty beans, different syrups. Cups and mugs, they insisted, were necessary for the experience. By the time everyone arrived, the kitchen counter island and dining room table had transformed into a small coffee laboratory. Every available space was covered with equipment. Everyone became both a barista and a customer, taking turns making drinks they had either never tried before or had always wanted to learn how to make. By the time everyone arrived, the kitchen counter island and dining room table had completely transformed. The house looked less like a home and more like a small private cafe. Every available space was covered with coffee equipment. Tate and I had decided we wanted everyone to have options, so we prepared a variety of espresso drinks for our guests. There were classic espresso shots for the people who wanted the pure taste of coffee. Stronger double shots for those who needed something with more intensity, and smoother drinks mixed with milk for those who preferred something lighter. We made cappuccinos with thick foam, lattes with steamed milk, and different variations that allowed everyone to experiment. Some people preferred the stronger, sharper flavor of straight espresso. Others enjoyed sweeter drinks with chocolate, caramel, vanilla, or other flavors mixed in. There were even a few desserts made with espresso, because apparently coffee wasn't enough unless it became part of the dessert. Everyone became involved. Anna and Bree treated the drinks like an art project, discussing presentation, colors, and how each cup looked before anyone even tasted it. Jack became fascinated with the process and compared making coffee to creating art. He claimed there was a difference between simply preparing a drink and creating an experience. Susie enjoyed trying different combinations and quickly became one of the most creative people at the table. Andrew approached it more practically, trying to figure out which drinks were actually worth the effort on a normal morning. Tate pretended the entire thing was casual. He acted as if he had simply provided the equipment and space. But I knew him. He loved moments like this. He loved creating reasons for people to gather. For someone who spent so much of his life carrying expectations, responsibilities, and the weight of his family name, Tate always seemed happiest when he could create something simple. A reason for everyone to slow down. A reason for friends to sit together. A reason for laughter. The house filled with the smell of coffee, steamed milk, and chocolate. People talked. People experimented. Everyone tried something new. And by the end of the evening, nobody could agree on which drink was the best. But everyone agreed on one thing. Tate had somehow managed to turn making coffee into a memory. I want to try a macchiato. Bree looked up from the coffee cookbook she had been flipping through and smiled. The book had become almost as popular as the espresso machines themselves. Everyone had been passing it around, looking at different recipes, different techniques, and drinks they had never tried before. "I've never had an Irish coffee," Bree said, turning the page. "This looks kind of interesting." That immediately started another round of curiosity. Someone had to know what it tasted like. Someone had to try it. That was how the entire evening had gone. One person would mention a drink they had never had before, and suddenly everyone wanted to experiment. We took turns using everyone's appliances. One person would make espresso with one machine while someone else would steam milk with another. Different grinders, frothers, and coffee makers were passed around as everyone compared the differences. It became less about finding the perfect drink and more about enjoying the experience. There were serious discussions about flavor. Arguments about whether one machine made better foam than another. Debates over whether a drink needed more espresso, less milk, more sweetness, or absolutely nothing added at all. Tate, of course, had an opinion about everything. He would take a sip, pause dramatically, and analyze it like he was judging a competition. Sometimes he loved a drink. Sometimes he claimed it was interesting, which everyone knew meant he didn't like it. But the funny thing was that nobody really found a drink they disliked. Even the ones that sounded unusual ended up being enjoyable. Everyone had a favorite. Everyone found something new. The night wasn't about becoming coffee experts. It was about laughing, trying things together, and enjoying the fact that everyone was willing to be a beginner at something. By the end of the evening, the kitchen was full of empty cups, coffee grounds, and people still debating which drink they would make next time. It was exactly the kind of gathering Tate loved. A simple idea that became a memory. November brought Thanksgiving, and that year, Andrew decided to host a Thanksgiving brunch at his place. It was wonderful. The plan was simple. Everyone who had time would bring 2 side dishes. If someone was too busy, nobody worried about it because Andrew had already prepared enough food to feed what felt like an entire navy. That was the only way to describe it. Walking into his home felt less like arriving at a small gathering and more like stepping onto a ship preparing to feed hundreds of people. There was food everywhere. Andrew had prepared an incredible spread, including at least 20 different kinds of drinks. There were hot drinks, cold drinks, seasonal drinks, and combinations that I had never even heard of before. The table became a competition without anyone officially declaring it won. Jack immediately announced that he was the only person bringing stuffing and baked potatoes. Everyone laughed because, knowing Jack, he had probably already planned it weeks in advance. "I want to do something different," he explained. He brought his grandfather's recipe for baked potatoes. It wasn't just a recipe to Jack. It was a family tradition. He was proud to share something that had been passed down through his family, and everyone appreciated the story behind it as much as the food itself. Bree and Anna immediately focused their attention on anything involving marshmallows and desserts. They claimed they were simply helping. Nobody believed them. They had a talent for finding the sweetest things on any table. Susie decided she would take responsibility for the vegetables and pasta dishes. She brought balance to the meal, making sure there was something lighter among all the rich Thanksgiving food. Meanwhile, Talia and Terrence took control of the gravy station. Nobody questioned this. Terrence especially treated the gravy like it was another one of his important responsibilities. The same way he protected his grill, he protected the gravy. She brought balance to the meal, making sure there was something lighter among all the rich Thanksgiving food. The entire day was filled with laughter, stories, and people moving around the kitchen trying to taste everything. Nobody was in a hurry. Nobody cared about having the perfect meal. The point was being together. And that was what made Andrew's Thanksgiving brunch so memorable. It wasn't just the amount of food. It wasn't the number of dishes or the variety of recipes. It was the feeling of being surrounded by people who had become family. A table full of different traditions, different personalities, and different lives, somehow coming together for one day. After everyone had eaten and the conversation had slowed into the comfortable rhythm that came after a big meal, Talia looked around the table. The plates were still scattered everywhere. People were holding coffee cups, picking at desserts, and enjoying the last few quiet moments before everyone had to return to their normal lives. So Talia asked, smiling, "How was everyone's year?" It became a tradition within the tradition. Everyone went around and shared one thing they were thankful for. It wasn't always something huge. Sometimes it was a person. Sometimes it was an accomplishment. Sometimes it was simply a moment that had mattered. Andrew went first. "I'm doing all right," he said. He looked tired but happy. "I have 2 weeks until I start taking my midterms, though." Everyone laughed because they knew what that meant. "I'm going to abuse coffee for a few weeks until I finally finish my last exam." Tate immediately looked toward the coffee station. "That explains why you're going to be awake for the next month." Andrew shrugged. "Necessary sacrifice." The girls talked about their upcoming art exhibits. Anna and Bree discussed their plans, their pieces, and the different shows they were preparing for. Susie talked about upcoming projects and shopping trips they had planned. They were all busy building their own futures, and it was exciting watching their confidence grow. Talia and Terrence explained that they would be leaving during the first 2 weeks of December. They were planning to visit Tim in New York City. Tim had always divided his time between New York City and Philadelphia, where he owned both a condo and a townhouse. He enjoyed having options and being close to different parts of his life. Unfortunately, he wasn't even in New York at the moment. Tim was currently in Mexico dealing with the emergency merger of two businesses, which meant his schedule had become unpredictable. Then everyone started talking about Uncle Joey. Or more accurately, the fact that Uncle Joey had once again failed to make it to a family gathering. He was stuck in Colorado. A massive snowfall had delayed flights and left him stranded at the airport for 2 days. The poor man hadn't even had a chance. Joey had tried. He really had. But weather, flights, and circumstances seemed determined to stop him. According to Talia, Joey had finally declared that the heavens were against him. That was when Tate completely lost it. He laughed so hard he almost choked on his gravy. Everyone stared at him. Tate tried to recover, but the harder he tried to explain why it was funny, the more he laughed. "He's cursed," Tate managed between laughs. "Every time he tries to come here, something happens." The whole table started laughing. Because as much as everyone felt bad for Joey, it was becoming impossible not to notice the pattern. For years, he had been the person who always somehow ended up missing the event. And somehow, that had become part of the family story. By the end of the conversation, nobody was focused on the missed flights or the delayed visits. They were focused on what mattered. Everyone was moving forward. Everyone had something to be grateful for. And sitting around that Thanksgiving table, surrounded by people who had become family, it felt like the year had been a good one. Christmas came, and that year everyone gathered on Christmas Day instead of Christmas Eve. It was a small change, but it somehow made the holiday feel different. By the time everyone arrived, Talia's house had already been transformed. The biggest change was the living room. Talia had put up new wallpaper, and it was impossible not to notice. The party room, as she called it, had always been bright and open, but she had decided it was becoming too white. "It needs something," she had declared. Her solution was lavender wallpaper. It was unexpected. It was bold. And it was very Talia. Terrence acted like he didn't care. He looked at the walls once, then immediately pretended he hadn't noticed. It wasn't like he spent his time staring at wallpaper. He was there to eat, talk, and spend time with everyone. But even he had to admit that if the lavender wallpaper made Talia happy, it was probably worth it. Besides, Terrence knew his wife. A small home project could keep her happy for months. In his mind, that alone made it a successful decision. Privately, he thought it was actually a good idea. He just wasn't going to admit that too quickly. Everyone knew better than to underestimate Talia's ability to change a room. The only person missing, unfortunately, was Joey. Of course. This Christmas, Joey was stuck in Boston attending a business meeting. He had tried to get out of it. He really had. But once again, circumstances had somehow managed to keep him away from another family gathering. The Secret Santa exchange began after everyone had finished eating and the living room had settled into the comfortable chaos that always came with Christmas. People gathered around the tree, laughing and comparing guesses about who had picked whose name. Everyone had a gift. Everyone was trying to figure out who had been secretly shopping for them. As people reached under the tree and started pulling out wrapped presents, the phone rang. Before anyone else could move, Tate stood up. "I'll get it." He walked toward the phone with complete confidence. "It's probably one of the women I know." Everyone laughed. But no one noticed Talia's expression. She did not look amused. Over the years, Tate had developed a reputation for people calling the house looking for him. Not just friends. Not just business contacts. Women he had met, women who wanted to speak with him, women who somehow believed calling Talia's house was an acceptable way to reach him. It had become such a frequent occurrence that Talia had eventually purchased a new phone screening machine. If the number wasn't recognized, the caller couldn't leave a message. She was done having her home turned into Tate's personal communication center. She had made that very clear. During Thanksgiving, when one more call had interrupted dinner, Talia had finally reached her limit. She had walked over to Tate, lightly smacked him on the shoulder and told him exactly what she thought. "Tate, I am not your personal assistant." Everyone had laughed. Tate had looked offended. He had claimed he had no idea why people kept calling the house. Nobody believed him. Because Tate had a strange ability to attract attention wherever he went. The funny part was that he acted completely confused by it. Now on Christmas Day, as he picked up the phone, everyone watched him. Noah watched especially closely. Because despite Tate's joking tone, there was something different about him lately. For the past year, Tate had spent more time at home. More time with them. More time being part of a family instead of constantly running from one obligation to another. The phone call lasted only a few moments. Tate listened. Then his expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for Noah to notice. He covered the receiver for a second and looked back at everyone. "It's not one of my admirers." Talia raised an eyebrow. "Good, because I am not redirecting another phone call for you on Christmas." Tate rolled his eyes. "I know." But he smiled. And Noah realized that was what made these moments so different. A year ago, Tate would have been trying to escape. Trying to distance himself. Trying to convince everyone, including himself, that he didn't belong there. Now he was standing in Talia's living room on Christmas Day, surrounded by people who loved him, holding a phone and pretending he wasn't secretly happy to be exactly where he was. "Hello." Tate answered the phone while everyone continued opening their Secret Santa gifts. For a moment his expression was neutral. Then his face changed. "No." A pause. "No, Talia's helping with the Secret Santa party that you're not currently at." The tone in his voice caught everyone's attention. It wasn't his usual teasing. There was something sharper underneath it. Something disappointed. Everyone slowly stopped unwrapping their gifts. They knew that voice. They knew Tate well enough to recognize when a joke was covering something else. Tate listened for a few more seconds before letting out a humorless laugh. "What a surprise." He looked around the room. "You know, I think this is the 5th time." Nobody spoke. "You're kind of like Jesus, Joey," Tate said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Everyone keeps saying you're going to come back, but you never actually do." A few people looked down, trying not to laugh because they knew Tate was frustrated, but they also knew he was being dramatic. That was Tate. When he cared about something, he cared intensely. "And you know what?" Tate continued. "Next time, just don't call when you don't show up." He paused. "We'll just take it as a sign that you enjoy airports, business meetings, women, and whatever else you're doing more than you enjoy being here." A longer silence. Then Tate rolled his eyes. "I'll just spend my time with Noah, who's actually here." Silence. "Yeah, okay, fuck you." The room went completely quiet. Not because of the words. Everyone had heard Tate say worse. It was because of the emotion behind them. He wasn't actually angry. Not really. He was hurt. Then Tate slammed the receiver back into the cradle. Everyone stared at him. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then someone finally asked the obvious. Who isn't showing up again? Tate looked around the room. Nobody needed an answer. They all already knew. Joey. Again. The room exchanged knowing looks. It was becoming a family tradition at this point. The missing holiday. The delayed flight. The unavoidable emergency. The promise that he would make it next time. And then somehow next time came and something else happened. Tate crossed his arms. Fifth fucking time, he muttered. Noah watched him carefully. He knew Tate's anger wasn't really about Joey missing Christmas. It was about the fact that Joey mattered to him. If Tate didn't care, he wouldn't be upset. He wouldn't make jokes. He wouldn't keep track. Someone else laughed softly. Maybe he'll make it next year. Tate immediately looked offended. Why would he? Everyone looked at him. Tate gestured toward the phone. It's not like he has a history of showing up. The room laughed. Even Tate smiled a little. Because as frustrating as Joey's absence had become, he was still part of the family. And even when Tate complained, everyone knew the truth. He wouldn't have been angry if he hadn't wished Joey had been there. Tate walked back toward the Christmas tree in silence. For a moment, Noah thought he was going to let it go. That maybe the anger would pass. But Tate had never been good at pretending something didn't bother him. He crouched down and pulled out the wrapped gift that he and Noah had bought for Joey. It had been chosen carefully. Not because it was expensive. Because it meant something. It was the kind of gift that said, we know you, we thought about you, we wanted you here. Tate stared at it for a few seconds. Then he walked across the room toward the trash can. Everyone watched him. Tate. Noah started to say something, but Tate didn't stop. He dropped the gift into the trash. Then he pushed the lid down firmly. Problem solved, he said. The words were casual. Too casual. That was what made Noah notice. Tate wasn't actually angry about the gift. He was angry about the empty chair. The missing person. The fact that another holiday memory had happened without Joey being there. Tate turned around as if nothing had happened and walked back toward the tree. He picked up his Secret Santa gift. Then he looked around at everyone. Well, look at that. His voice was full of sarcasm. Something actually showed up for our party. A few people exchanged looks. They knew exactly who he meant. All of you managed to show up, Tate continued, but somehow he can't. He shook his head. Typical. Someone laughed quietly, and Tate immediately opened the gift before anyone could comment. What, he said, I'm just making an observation. Noah watched him unwrap the present. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Disappointment. Because Tate could joke about Joey missing another holiday, but the truth was much simpler. Tate wanted him there. He wanted the memories. Tate wanted the people he loved to choose to be present. As the wrapping paper fell away, Tate looked down at the gift. What is it? Everyone leaned closer, curious. For the first time in several minutes, the mood began to shift. The Christmas morning feeling slowly returned. But Noah still noticed the trash can sitting across the room. The gift was meant for Joey. A reminder that sometimes the people we missed the most were the ones we wished would show up. An hour or two later, the energy of Christmas had settled back into something quieter. The gifts had been opened. The food had been eaten. The laughter had faded into smaller conversations around the room. But Tate was still sitting on the couch, sulking. No one knew that expression. It was the expression Tate wore when he was pretending he wasn't upset. He would cross his arms, stare at nothing, and insist he was perfectly fine while making it very clear that he was absolutely not fine. Noah disappeared for a moment and returned with a gift he had hidden inside his duffel bag. This is for you, Noah said. Tate looked over. There are two gifts, open mine first. That caught Tate's attention. Noah handed him the first box. Tate opened it and for once, the sulking expression disappeared. Inside was the newest gaming system. Tate stared at it. No way. Noah smiled. On Sunday evenings, when there wasn't anything good on television, they had started playing video games together. It had become another one of their quiet traditions. Two grown men sitting on the couch, arguing over strategy, trying to beat each other, and both secretly determined to become experts. Neither one liked losing. Especially not to the other. Tate looked at the system again, and a small smile appeared. "You're trying to beat me with this, aren't you?" "No." Tate raised an eyebrow. "You're lying." Noah laughed. Tate leaned over and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek before placing the gaming system beside him. It was small, almost effortless, but Noah still noticed. Because those moments were the ones Tate rarely acknowledged. The ones where he showed affection without thinking. And the second one, Tate asked. Noah handed him the other gift. Tate looked at the box. "It looks like a clothing box." He opened it carefully. Inside was a scarf. A blue scarf. It was beautiful. Expensive. The kind of thing that had clearly been chosen with thought. Tate lifted it from the box and noticed a small note attached. His expression changed as he read it. "In case I can't come or the weather doesn't permit it, I just wanted you to have your gift. Joseph Blue." The room became quiet. Noah watched Tate's face. For a moment there was no anger. Only hurt. Then the walls came back up. Tate folded the scarf carefully and placed it back into the box. Nobody said anything. He stood, walked across the room, and opened the trash can. Noah knew what he was going to do before he did it. The scarf joined the other gift. The lid slammed shut. "Problem solved," Tate said again. But this time his voice was quieter. Noah stared at him. Because the truth was obvious. Tate didn't hate the gift. He hated what it represented. A gift delivered without the person attached. An apology without presence. A reminder that someone had thought about him but still hadn't been there. Tate walked back to the couch and sat down. Everyone returned to their conversations, but Noah couldn't stop looking at the trash can. 2 gifts meant for Joey. 2 reminders that he had missed another family moment. And somehow, Tate's anger was the clearest proof of how much Joey mattered to him. Andrew had brought a few specialty cocktails with him for Christmas. At first, they were meant to be something fun to try after dinner. Something everyone could sample while they continued talking. But at some point, when people weren't paying attention, Tate had started drinking them faster than anyone realized. Noah noticed only after it was already too late. Tate was sitting on the couch, but barely. His posture had gone from his usual confident, controlled position to something much more relaxed and unsteady. His head leaned back against the couch cushion. His eyes were half-lidded. And for once, Tate Blue looked completely defeated. Not by an argument. Not by responsibility. Not by his family. By 12 cocktails. Noah stared at him. "How many did you have?" Tate looked over slowly. 10 or more. Noah blinked. "What?" 10 or more, Tate repeated, completely serious. Then he burped. Before Noah could respond, Tate leaned sideways and lost his balance, falling mostly onto him. Noah caught him, trying not to laugh while also trying to make sure Tate didn't accidentally fall off the couch. "Oh my gosh, Tate." He looked down at him. "You smell like a distillery." Tate mumbled something that sounded like an argument but didn't actually form words. Noah looked across the room. "Andrew." Andrew immediately looked guilty. "Did you give him all those drinks?" Andrew shook his head quickly. "No." Everyone looked at him. "He made them himself." Noah looked back at Tate. "Of course." That somehow made more sense. Andrew sighed. "I tried to take them away from him." He pointed toward the kitchen. "I really did." A few people laughed. He just walked over, picked up a huge bottle of vodka, and started chugging it in one gulp. The room went silent for a second. Then everyone looked at Tate. Even drunk, he somehow looked offended. Tate didn't drink unless it was one holiday cocktail at parties. He never socially drank or got drunk. "I was fine," Tate mumbled. "No, you were not," Noah said. Tate frowned, then hiccuped in a cute manner. "I was emotionally stable." "No, Tate." "I was." "Tate, you are currently using me as furniture." Tate looked down, apparently realizing he was half lying across Noah. After a moment, he simply accepted it. Comfortable, very attractive furniture. Noah sighed. But despite everything, he couldn't help smiling. Because underneath the sarcasm and the dramatic comments and the anger he had carried all day, Noah knew what had really happened. Tate wasn't drinking because he wanted to celebrate. He was trying not to feel. The missing gift. The empty chair. Another holiday without Joey. And for a few hours, Tate had managed to make himself forget. Even if the solution involved Andrew's cocktails and an embarrassing amount of vodka. Andrew shook his head. I swear I was trying to stop him. Noah looked at Tate, who was now closing his eyes on the couch. I believe you. A pause. Unfortunately, I also believe Tate would fight a security system if it told him no. Everyone laughed. Even Tate, barely awake, smiled. And for the rest of the evening, Noah stayed exactly where he was. Holding up the world's most stubborn, impossible, and currently very drunk Tate Blue. Tate's legs wobbled as he pushed himself off the couch, the half-empty glass still clutched in one hand. The room tilted for him, but his eyes locked straight onto Noah. He staggered the short distance, ignoring the low murmur of voices around the table, and planted both palms on Noah's shoulders before swinging one leg over. His weight dropped heavily into Noah's lap, knees sinking into the cushions on either side of Noah's thighs. The sudden pressure made the wooden chair creak. Noah's whole body stiffened. His hands hovered in the air for a second before settling awkwardly on Tate's hips, not quite pushing yet. Around them the chatter died. Talia set her wine glass down with a soft clink. Terrence cleared his throat. Anna and Bree, seated across the low coffee table, exchanged quick glances before covering their mouths. Tate leaned in close, his breath thick with whiskey and vodka. I'm Joseph Blue, he announced, voice loud and slurred. A wet hiccup jolted his shoulders. Have I met you before? Noah's jaw tightened. Yeah, we've met, he answered quietly, eyes flicking toward the watching faces. Can you get off, Tate? You're a little heavy. Tate's lips pulled into a crooked grin. Another hiccup shook him. No, I don't remember my fucks because I'm an insufferable, selfish playboy, he slurred in the perfect Joey voice. I don't think about anyone's feelings but my own. I only think with my dick and with my wallet. Sometimes I use my wallet to get my dick satisfied, and when I'm not using my dick, I am a dick. He hiccuped again, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet. His gaze drifted over Noah's face like he was trying to place it. You're pretty, he said, groping Noah's hips. Have we fucked? Before Noah could answer, Tate's tongue dragged slowly across Noah's cheek in a wet, playful lick. The room went completely still. Anna snorted, then Bree joined her, both of them laughing openly now. Noah's face burned. He shifted beneath the weight, palms pressing more firmly against Tate's sides. Isn't he a teddy bear? Anna managed between laughs. Noah felt squished under the drunk stud. Get up, Tate. Noah tried again, voice strained. You're like a limp mattress. He pushed upward, but Tate only sank deeper, arms looping loosely around Noah's neck. Tate's head lolled forward until his forehead bumped Noah's. You want to go upstairs to my mattress? He slurred, the words thick and sticky. Another hiccup rattled through him, and his hips gave an unconscious roll that made the chair legs scrape against the floor. Noah's fingers dug into Tate's waist, trying to lift him without causing a scene, but Tate's body stayed limp and heavy, refusing to budge. The laughter from Anna and Bree grew louder. Tate's parents remained frozen, their expressions caught between embarrassment and disbelief. Noah's pulse hammered in his ears as he felt every eye in the room fixed on the drunken man sprawled across his lap, the wet streak on his cheek cooling in the air. Tate was still sitting on Noah's lap, completely unaware of the attention he was drawing. The alcohol had removed every layer of restraint he normally carried. The carefully controlled air. The intimidating businessman. The person who always knew exactly what to say. All of it was gone. What was left was a very drunk Tate who apparently believed he was a comedian. He suddenly straightened up and changed his voice. I am the life of the party, Tate announced. Then he deepened his voice, imitating Joey. Everyone immediately recognized what he was doing. Noah's expression changed. Tate. But Tate continued. I make plans, I make promises. He waved his hand dramatically like he was performing on a stage. And when my nephew is waiting by the window for me for 20 years, wondering when I'm going to arrive, I decide I'd rather visit an airport gift shop or disappear somewhere in a public restroom, fucking a hot ass instead of keeping my word. The laughter in the room faded. Because beneath the drunken performance was something real. Everyone knew Tate wasn't joking. Everyone also knew exactly why he was making the joke. Tate was hurt. He looked around the room, still using Joey's voice. So what if I missed 5 holidays? He shrugged. As long as I'm having fun, who cares, right? Noah watched him carefully. Tate laughed, but it didn't sound happy. So what if a young boy's feelings get crushed for the 1 millionth time anyway? The room became quiet. Even Anna and Bree stopped laughing. Because that was the part that gave him away. Tate wasn't just mocking Joey because he thought his favorite uncle was selfish. He was mocking him because some younger version of Tate had been standing at a window too. Waiting. Hopping. Believing someone would show up. Noah knew that Tate's anger had never been about a missed party. It was about disappointment. About broken promises. About people saying they would be there and then not being there. Tate looked down, his expression suddenly softer. People say they're coming, he mumbled in Joey's voice. A pause. Then they don't. Nobody responded. For once, Tate wasn't making a joke. He was just saying something he had probably felt for years. Noah reached over and gently steadied him. Tate. Tate blinked. What? You're drunk. Tate, consider that. That doesn't mean I'm wrong. Noah didn't answer. Because that was the hardest part. Even drunk, even dramatic, even completely ridiculous. Tate wasn't wrong about the one thing underneath all the jokes. He wanted the people he loved to choose him. And when they didn't, he remembered every single time. Tate was not done. The alcohol had loosened every restraint he normally held onto, and now he was performing a version of himself that was part anger, part sadness, and part something nobody in the room wanted to admit they understood. He changed his voice again. I'm a bastard, Tate said in Joey's voice. The room went quiet. I wear nice clothes, expensive sunglasses, $4,000 shoes, and I drive an old red pickup truck so people don't realize what I'm really like. He shook his head dramatically. Because underneath all that, I'm just a terrible person who disappoints people, breaks little boys' hearts, fixates on people, and makes a mockery of the Blue family. Noah watched him carefully. The jokes were getting sharper. Less funny. More painful. Tate continued, still pretending to be Joey. I'll disappear, miss every important event, end up somewhere I'm not supposed to be, and then act surprised when people are upset. A pause. Because why not? He looked around the room. I don't have a wife waiting for me at home because I have a childhood sweetheart. The room stayed silent. Tate rubbed his nose, suddenly looking much younger than he normally did. As long as I get my needs met, everything is fine, and fuck anyone I know who gets hurt or feels let down again. Noah felt something twist in his chest. Because beneath the ridiculous drunken performance was a truth Tate would never say sober. He cared. He cared so much that disappointment turned into anger because anger was easier to handle. Tate pushed himself up from Noah's lap. Okay. He nodded as if he had just solved something important. I'm going upstairs. Everyone watched him stand. Or attempt to stand. He made it a few steps before the room tilted. Noah immediately moved. Tate. But Tate waved him off. I'm fine. He was not fine. He took another step. Then another. I know a secret, Tate laughed. I do whatever I want regardless of who it hurts because love conquers all. Fuck Tate and fuck Noah, Tate said in Joey's voice. Then, after approximately 5 steps across the living room, Tate's balance disappeared completely. He fell headfirst onto the carpet. The room froze. For a second, nobody moved. Then Noah stood up quickly. Oh my gosh. He hurried over. Tate. No response. Noah looked down and realized Tate was completely unconscious. Not hurt. Just asleep. Completely defeated by his own emotions, Andrew's cocktails, and a lifetime of refusing to admit when something mattered to him. Noah sighed. You have got to be kidding me. Anna covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Bree whispered, is he okay? Noah carefully checked him. Yeah. He shook his head. He's just Tate. Everyone laughed quietly. Even in the middle of his worst moments, Tate somehow managed to turn himself into a disaster everyone had to take care of. Noah looked down at him. The same person who spent years insisting he didn't need anyone. The same person who claimed he didn't care. The same person who had just spent 20 minutes drunkenly explaining how much it hurt when someone didn't show up. Noah sighed and gently moved Tate into a more comfortable position. Because that was the thing about Tate. He could push people away. He could deny everything he felt. He could pretend he was made of stone. But when he finally let his guard down, even accidentally, everyone could see how much he carried. Tate spent the next 12 hours in his childhood bedroom. After his dramatic collapse in the living room, Andrew, Jack, Mark and Terrence had carefully carried him upstairs. Nobody wanted to admit it, but seeing Tate Blue, someone who normally seemed impossible to knock down, being carried like an exhausted child was one of the strangest things anyone had witnessed. Andrew immediately took responsibility. "I'm checking on him every 30 minutes, he announced. Everyone knew why. Tate had consumed an unreasonable amount of alcohol, and Andrew wasn't about to risk him waking up sick, choking, or getting himself into trouble while he was unconscious. So every half hour, Andrew quietly went upstairs to check on him. Sometimes Tate was asleep. Sometimes he mumbled something completely incoherent. Once he apparently complained that his pillow was too judgmental. Nobody knew what that meant. By Christmas morning standards, Tate was completely out of commission. He missed the rest of the gift exchange. Tate slept through the conversations. He missed the jokes everyone made about his drunken performance. And most importantly, he missed the chance to defend himself from everyone reminding him how ridiculous he had been. The family decided not to bother waking him. For once, Tate Blue had exhausted himself. The day continued without him. They ate Christmas turkey together. The Blue family and friends shared desserts. They sat around the piano and sang Christmas carols, the room filling with music and laughter. It was peaceful. The kind of holiday moment everyone remembered. Even though Tate wasn't downstairs, he was still part of the conversation. Someone would make a joke about something he had said. Someone else would shake their head. Everyone knew that when Tate woke up, he would deny every single thing. By 8 o'clock that evening, the house had settled down. The plates had been cleared. The piano had gone quiet. People were relaxing and talking when suddenly the phone rang. Everyone looked toward it. For a moment nobody moved. After the events of the day, everyone wondered the same thing. Who could it be? Noah looked toward the stairs. Tate was still upstairs. And somehow, everyone had a feeling that whoever was calling might somehow bring Tate right back into the middle of everything. Noah picked up the phone. "Hello. Hi, this is Shannon." Noah immediately recognized the voice. "I was hoping to talk to Tate." He glanced toward the staircase. "Tate's a little unavailable right now." There was a pause. "Is everything okay?" Noah hesitated. "He's drunk." A silence followed. "Drunk?" "Yeah, he had a few too many drinks and passed out upstairs." Noah softened his voice. "He's fine, he's just sleeping." "Oh. I'll take a message." Noah already knew Tate probably wasn't going to call her back. Not because Shannon had done anything wrong. Not because she had called. It was simply Tate. He had a way of moving on from people as quickly as they entered his life. Noah placed the phone back on the receiver. He had barely taken a step away when it rang again. Noah sighed and picked it up. "Hello. Hey, buddy." Noah froze. He knew that voice. "Joey." "Yeah, is Tate available? I wanted to talk to him." Noah looked upstairs again. "Sorry, no, Tate's upstairs." A pause. "He got so drunk he passed out." Joey immediately sounded concerned. "He did?" "Yeah. Is he okay?" "He's fine," Noah assured him. He was just doing his comedy routine. There was a brief silence. Then Joey laughed softly. "Oh no." Noah smiled despite himself. "Yeah. I can only imagine." Joey's voice became quieter. "Listen, I was actually calling to apologize." Noah leaned against the wall. "For Christmas?" "Yeah." Joey sighed. "My personal assistant gave me the wrong time for my flight. I got to the airport 30 minutes too late to board. Noah listened. I missed my flight, which meant I missed my connection. Joey sounded genuinely disappointed. I wanted to be there. Noah believed him. That was the complicated thing about Joey. Everyone knew he cared. The problem was that somehow, caring and showing up did not always happen at the same time. I'm sorry, Joey continued. I wanted to call Tate myself and tell him I was sorry. Noah looked toward the stairs. He would have appreciated that. Another pause. Did he get my gift? Noah glanced toward the trash can. The question made his chest tighten. Yeah, Noah said carefully, he got it. Joey sounded relieved. Good. Noah didn't mention the scarf. He didn't mention the gift box sitting in the trash. He didn't mention Tate's reaction. Because he knew something Joey probably already understood. Tate's anger wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he did. And sometimes that was the hardest thing for people to admit. I guess I'm a bastard, huh? Joey's voice was quieter now. The joke was gone. Noah knew that tone. It was the tone of someone who had already been punishing himself before anyone else had said anything. Noah shook his head. No, Joey. There was a pause. You're not a bastard. Joey didn't respond immediately. Noah leaned against the wall, still holding the phone. Sometimes real life happens, Noah continued. Sometimes things get complicated, expectations and circumstances get in the way. He glanced toward the staircase. Tate is just. Noah smiled slightly. Tate. Joey laughed softly. Yeah, that sounds about right. He cares more than he admits. I know. That answer surprised Noah. Because Joey sounded like he really did know. He's just angry because he wanted you here, Noah said. I know that too. Another quiet moment passed. Then Noah added, trying to lighten the mood. Just make sure you come next time. Joey laughed. Or what? Noah looked toward the stairs. Tate might jump off the roof using your voice as an airplane pilot. There was a pause. Then Joey burst out laughing. What? You heard me. Noah smiled. Tate was doing an impression of you on Christmas Day. An impression? Yeah. Was it terrible? No, Noah admitted. Actually, he does a pretty good impression of you. Joey laughed harder. I need to hear this, Noah. You probably don't. No, I definitely do, Joey smiled. Noah could hear the smile in Joey's voice. For a moment the tension disappeared. That was the strange thing about this family. They could be angry. They could hurt each other. Joey could miss important moments. But somehow they always found their way back to laughter. Tell him I'm sorry, Joey said. Noah became quiet. I will. And Noah. Yes. Thank you. Noah didn't answer right away. Because he knew Joey wasn't only thanking him for taking the call. He was thanking him for understanding. For giving him a little grace when Tate's anger made it difficult. I'll talk to you later, Joey. Love you later. Noah hung up the phone. For a moment he stood there quietly. Then he looked toward the staircase where Tate was sleeping off one of the most dramatic Christmas celebrations anyone had ever witnessed. Noah shook his head. Only Tate Blue could pass out on Christmas Day while doing an impression of his absent uncle, he whispered. And despite everything, the missed holidays, the arguments, the hurt feelings, he smiled. Because somehow, even the disasters became family memories. Tate came downstairs the day after Christmas Day around noon. The first sign that he was awake was the sound of him complaining. He walked into the kitchen holding his head, his hair a mess, his expression somewhere between miserable and offended. That old bastard ruined my Christmas, Tate muttered. Nobody had to ask who he meant. Noah looked up from his coffee. Good morning to you too. Tate ignored him and made his way toward the lunch table. The moment he sat down, he immediately regretted it. The sunlight coming through the windows seemed painfully bright. The sound of dishes moving around the kitchen sounded like someone was dropping metal objects next to his head. Tate covered his face. Why is everything so loud? Tate grimaced. Everyone sitting at the table looked at him. It sounds like a boom box in here. Noah tried not to laugh. You drank enough alcohol to forget your own name, Tate. I did not. You introduced yourself as Joseph Blue. Tate froze. A few people at the table laughed. I was making a joke. You were sitting on my lap. Tate stared at him. Noah smiled. You were also doing a Joseph Blue impression. You looked and sounded just like him, Tate. It was uncanny and a bit creepy. Tate frowned. I don't remember that, Noe. Of course you don't. Before Tate could respond, Terrence walked into the kitchen. Seeing his son sitting there, he smiled and then yelled on purpose as a joke. Good morning, son. He said it loudly. Very loudly. Tate's entire body reacted. He jumped so suddenly that his chair nearly moved backward. Everyone burst out laughing. Noah laughed the hardest. That's what you get, Tate, Noah smiled. Tate looked at him offended. For what? For drinking like a fish. I was celebrating, Tate defended his choice. You were doing your Joseph Blue impression for the party, then later you played dead on the living room floor after you passed out. Tate stared. I did not. You did, Noah corrected. No. Tate. Noah gave him a look. Everyone saw it. Tate rubbed his forehead. I hate all of you. No, you don't. A reluctant smile almost appeared on Tate's face. Then Noah remembered something else. Oh, and you need to apologize to Andrew. Tate looked up. Why? Noah hesitated. Because he walked in on you a few hours later in your bedroom upstairs while making sure you hadn't choked on your own vomit. Tate's expression changed. What? He was checking on you. Noah paused. And unfortunately, he found you with your pants down doing God knows what to your dick. The entire table went silent. Tate grinned, proud of his anatomy. Andrew, sitting nearby, looked like he wanted to disappear. He's traumatized, Noah added. Tate grinned with pride again. You lucky bastard, Tate said, smiling at Andrew. I'm moving, Andrew groaned. No, you're not, Noah laughed. I'm leaving the country. Andrew, you said that yesterday. I meant it. The room filled with laughter again. And despite Tate's headache, Andrew's embarrassment, and Tate's regret over the previous night, Noah noticed something. Tate wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The pain from Christmas was still there. The disappointment was still there. But he was surrounded by people who loved him enough to laugh at him, embarrass him, and still save him when he fell apart. And for Tate Blue, that was probably the closest thing to forgiveness he ever allowed himself to accept. New Year's came and went. After the chaos of Christmas, everyone was ready for something lighter. Talia decided to host a New Year's fireworks party in the backyard, insisting that the best way to start a new year was with good food, good company, and enough decorations to make Terrence complain about how much work it would be to clean everything up afterward. Of course, nobody listened to Terrence. The backyard was filled with lights, music, and people moving between tables of food while they waited for midnight. Talia had prepared her usual spread, including barbecue little sausage weenies that somehow disappeared faster than anything else she made. Terrence stood near the grill, proudly guarding his territory as usual. Nobody was allowed near his grill space without permission. Noah had brought a watermelon and enough ball game food that everyone joked he had prepared for a stadium instead of a backyard party. But nobody complained. Food was one of the things that brought everyone together. There was always something to share. Something to talk about. Something that made an ordinary evening feel like a memory. Andrew, unfortunately, nearly made himself the main event of the night. He had decided he was capable of handling some of the fireworks. Everyone immediately became concerned. Andrew, Noah warned. I know what I'm doing, Andrew insisted. Nobody believed him. A few minutes later, Andrew learned exactly why everyone had been concerned. One of the fireworks took longer than expected. His eyes widened. Oh no! He threw it away from himself just in time. The firework shot into the air and exploded safely away from everyone. The entire backyard went silent for a moment. Then everyone started yelling. Andrew! I'm fine, he shouted. Everyone rushed over anyway. You almost blew off your finger. I said I'm fine. You almost became a medical case study, Jack said. Andrew looked embarrassed. I miscalculated. Tate, standing nearby, shook his head. That's a very polite way of saying you almost removed a body part. Everyone laughed. Even Andrew. Noah watched the group together. The year had started with arguments, hurt feelings, and a Christmas full of emotional disasters. But somehow they were here. Together. Talia and Terrence were laughing. Andrew was being teased. Jack, Anna, Bree, and Susie were talking about upcoming plans. And Tate, despite his usual complaints, was standing in the middle of everyone instead of trying to escape. When midnight approached, everyone gathered outside. The fireworks lit up the sky. For a moment nobody argued. Nobody worried about the past. They simply watched. And Noah thought that maybe that was what mattered most. Not perfect holidays. Not perfect people. Just the moments when everyone chose to be there. 5 minutes before midnight, while everyone was gathered outside waiting for the fireworks, the phone rang. The timing was almost too perfect. Tate looked toward the phone. When he saw the number, his expression immediately changed. Everyone noticed. Noah especially. Because Tate could pretend not to care about a lot of things, but he could never hide when something mattered. Tate picked up the phone. Hello. A pause. Then his face hardened. Fuck you, old man. The entire backyard went silent. Even the people who had been talking stopped. The fireworks crew stopped moving. Everyone turned toward Tate. No one said a word while he was on the phone. Tate walked a few steps away, but his voice carried. I'll tell you what to do. A pause. No, actually, I'll make this easy. His jaw tightened. Why don't you unbuckle your pants and fuck yourself? Everyone exchanged looks. They all knew who he was talking to. Joey. In 5 minutes, it's midnight, Tate continued. 1993 is a new year during which you won't be in my life. His voice became colder. Some things never change. He looked down at the ground. Do yourself a favor. A pause. Lose my number. The anger in his voice covered something deeper, something wounded. You're dead to me. Nobody laughed or made a joke. Because everyone knew Tate didn't say things like that because he didn't care. He said them because he cared too much. And don't come anywhere near me. Then Tate ended the call. For a moment he just stood there holding the phone. The backyard remained quiet. The countdown was getting closer. But Tate wasn't thinking about fireworks anymore. He walked toward the alcohol. Noah immediately noticed. Of course he did. Tate. I'm getting a drink. No. Tate looked at him. No. No, Tate. Tate reached again, but Noah took the bottle away first. Tate. I'm fine. No, you're angry. I'm not. You just told someone they were dead to you 5 minutes before midnight. Tate opened his mouth. Then closed it. Noah held onto the bottle. Go sit down. Tate stared at him. Noah. Sit down and act like you're 24 years old. Everyone watched. Because there were very few people in the world who could talk to Tate that way. And somehow Noah was one of them. Tate looked annoyed. He looked like he wanted to argue. But eventually he walked over and sat down. Noah sat beside him. Neither of them spoke. The fireworks waited. The new year approached. And beneath all the anger and the insults and the dramatic declarations, Noah knew the truth. Tate wasn't angry because Joey called. Tate was angry because some part of him had still hoped Joey would visit instead. Even after everything, even after years of disappointment, that was the part of Tate nobody saw, the part that still wanted people to choose him. Uncle Tim walked over quietly. Unlike everyone else, he didn't try to make a joke. He didn't tell Tate to calm down. Tim didn't tell him he was overreacting. He simply sat down beside him and put a hand on his shoulder. That's just how Joey is, Tim said. Tate looked away. Tim sighed. And I'm not making excuses for the old bastard. That got the smallest reaction from Tate. A slight movement. A sign that he was listening. Joey cares about people, Tim continued. But he also cares about his freedom, travels, women, wallet, work, adventures, and shiny things while maintaining his ability to do whatever he wants whenever he wants. He shook his head. Sometimes more than he should. Tate stared at the fireworks equipment sitting in the yard. He uses business as a cover, Tim said. Because if he's busy, then he doesn't have to admit that he hurt someone or face the consequences of disappointing family and those who rely on him. Tate didn't answer. Because that was the part that bothered him the most. Not that Joey had a life or traveled, not that Joey had his own problems, it was that Joey could always find a reason. A flight. A meeting. A business emergency. Something was always more important than showing up for him. Tim squeezed his shoulder. I know you're angry. I'm not angry. Tim raised an eyebrow. Tate. A pause. Fine, I'm angry. Tim smiled slightly. I figured. The two sat quietly for a moment, then Tim reached into the cooler he had brought outside and handed Tate something. Tate looked down. Ice cream. He stared at it. What is this? Peace offering. Tate looked suspicious. Are you trying to bribe me? Yes. Tate looked at it anyway. I don't like ice cream, Tate frowned. It reminds me of the old bastard who disappointed me. Maybe if I get lucky, Joey will get chlamydia and then he'll finally have to admit he needs to grow up. I hope he gets blue balls too. Tim smiled. Yeah, that would be some karma. Tate shook his head. Since my ball and chain won't let me drink like a fish anymore, I guess I'll get fat instead. Tim laughed. There he is. Who? The Tate I know. Tate rolled his eyes. But he kept sitting there while Tim handed his nephew a root beer float instead of ice cream. Noah watched from a short distance away. It was strange how quickly Tate could go from furious to sitting quietly with his new favorite uncle. But Noah understood. Tate didn't actually need someone to fix everything. He needed someone to stay. Someone who would sit beside him when he was angry or wouldn't disappear just because he was difficult. And Tim, for all his teasing, knew that better than most. The new year began quietly. After the emotional roller coaster of Christmas and New Year's Eve, January seemed determined to give everyone a chance to breathe. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm. Bree and Anna received wonderful news when one of their solo art exhibitions was featured in a regional arts magazine. The article praised the warmth and technical skill of their work, and for the first time they found themselves answering calls from galleries they had only dreamed of exhibiting in. Susie insisted on buying 3 copies of the magazine, while Jack proudly declared he had always known they were destined for bigger things. Jack's own career continued to flourish. Business at his gallery had grown so much that he finally admitted he couldn't keep track of everything himself anymore. After months of resisting the idea, he hired an accountant to organize the gallery's finances, freeing him to spend more time discovering new artists and expanding the exhibitions. True to his nature, Jack dedicated one entire section of the gallery to displaying artwork created by his friends, insisting that if he was going to succeed, he wanted the people he cared about to succeed alongside him. Tim remained in Los Angeles for the first 2 weeks of January. Originally, the visit had been planned around business meetings, but it gradually became something else. He and Tate began spending time together. Some mornings they went out for breakfast before Tate headed downtown to the Blue Corporation offices. On other afternoons they wandered through antique stores, classic car shows, bookstores, and museums. Tim had an easygoing personality that never demanded conversation, and Tate found himself talking more than he expected. Sometimes they discussed business, sometimes family history, sometimes they simply sat in silence over coffee. Neither of them acknowledged it aloud, but they were becoming closer. Tim never tried to replace Joey. He never criticized Joey in front of Tate. His uncle simply showed up, again and again. For Tate, consistency meant more than promises ever could. As for Uncle Joey, January passed without a single phone call. No voicemail, postcard, apology. Anyone noticed, they were careful not to mention it. Tate certainly didn't. Whenever someone accidentally brought Joey's name into a conversation, Tate dismissed it with a shrug or changed the subject entirely. I'm over it, he would say. Or I really don't care. Noah had known Tate long enough to recognize the difference between someone who truly didn't care and someone who desperately wanted everyone to believe they didn't. Tate never looked at the phone anymore. He never asked whether anyone had called. He never mentioned Joey. But every now and then, Noah would catch him staring out the front window for no reason at all. just for a few seconds, before turning away and pretending he had been looking at something else. Noah never brought it up. Some disappointments were too quiet to interrupt. They simply had to be carried until they became lighter. February brought warmer weather and, for the first time in months, the feeling that life had truly settled into something peaceful. One evening, while they were watching television, Tate muted the sound and looked over at Noah. "You've never been to Austria, have you?" Noah shook his head. "No." "Pack a suitcase, Noe." Noah laughed. "That's not really an invitation. It's a statement. When do we leave?" "In 2 weeks." And just like that, the trip was planned. It was Tate's idea. He called it his last hurrah before turning 25. "If I'm going to spend my entire life buried in board meetings and corporate nonsense," he said, "I deserve one vacation." "So do I. You get dragged along because you're decorative." "I'm decorative. You've got nice blonde hair, it balances out all the old buildings." Noah rolled his eyes. "You're impossible. I've been told." The night before they left, Talia insisted on hosting a small farewell dinner. "It isn't every day you boys disappear across the Atlantic," she said. The dining room was filled with laughter as everyone offered advice. "Don't lose your passports," Terrence warned. "Wear warm clothes," Anna added. "Bring back chocolate," Bree requested. "And postcards," Susie chimed in. Andrew handed Noah a compact first aid kit. "You never know." Jack gave him a leather luggage tag engraved with his initials. "So your suitcase doesn't end up in another country." Talia, of course, had gone completely overboard. She filled a gift bag with travel organizers, luggage markers, passport holders, neck pillows, portable chargers, travel-sized toiletries, and enough snacks to survive an unexpected delay on the other side of the world. Talia, Noah laughed, "We're only going for a couple of weeks." "I know," she replied, "that's why I packed for 6. Even Tate smiled. When departure morning arrived, they boarded a first-class flight to Vienna. Tate insisted on paying for everything. The airfare, hotels, museum passes, train tickets, dinners, every cup of coffee, and a ridiculous souvenir Noah picked up because he thought it looked interesting. "Noah." "What?" "You do realize that tiny wooden music box costs more than the one next to it." "I like this one." Tate sighed dramatically before handing over his credit card. "Of course you do. Fine, it's yours," he said, buying it for his traveling companion before returning to their hotel. Austria was everything Noah had imagined and more. The streets were lined with centuries-old architecture, elegant cafes, and grand palaces that seemed untouched by time. They spent long afternoons wandering through museums, standing in front of masterpieces they had only ever seen in books. Tate surprised Noah with how much he knew about European history, often pausing to point out details in paintings or explain the stories behind historic buildings. The food was unforgettable. They lingered over warm pastries in the mornings, sampled rich stews and perfectly prepared schnitzel for dinner, and ended nearly every evening sharing desserts in cafes that overlooked cobblestone streets glowing beneath old-fashioned lamps. Some days they explored castles and gardens. Other days they simply wandered without a destination, discovering hidden bookstores, antique shops, and quiet little squares where musicians played for passing tourists. For a little while, the responsibilities waiting for Tate back in Los Angeles didn't exist. There were no board meetings. No family expectations or endless phone calls. Just history, art, beautiful scenery, and the comfort of traveling with the one person who had always made every destination feel a little more like home. It was, as Tate liked to call it, his last hurrah before turning 25. And for those precious weeks, the world felt wonderfully uncomplicated. They made a point of trying somewhere new almost every day. Some mornings began in small cafes where the smell of fresh bread and strong coffee drifted through the narrow streets before sunrise. Tate insisted that if they were going to visit Austria, they were going to eat like Austrians instead of searching for familiar restaurants. Noah happily agreed. One evening, they shared a perfectly crisp Wiener Schnitzel, served with parsley potatoes and a wedge of lemon that Tate squeezed over nearly the entire plate. Another afternoon, they wandered into a family-owned restaurant where Noah ordered tafelspitz, tender boiled beef served with roasted potatoes, vegetables, apple horseradish, and chive sauce. Tate teased him for ordering something that looked so simple until he stole several bites from Noah's plate. "I was just making sure it wasn't poisoned," Tate said. "You've stolen half my lunch. I'm protecting you." They sampled bowls of rich goulash, accompanied by thick slices of crusty rye bread, warming themselves after spending hours walking through museums. One evening, they tried Käsespätzle, soft egg noodles coated in melted Alpine cheese and topped with crispy fried onions. Tate declared it one of the greatest comfort foods ever invented and immediately ordered another serving for the table. Noah insisted they try Tiroler Grürsel, a hearty skillet of roasted potatoes, onions, beef, and a fried egg that reminded him of the sort of meal someone would happily eat after hiking through the mountains all day. Dessert quickly became Noah's favorite part of every meal. He fell in love with slices of rich Sockertorte, layered with apricot jam beneath a smooth chocolate glaze. Tate preferred warm Apfelstrudel dusted generously with powdered sugar and served with vanilla sauce.